squeaky on my watch. Oh, there's no grease for it. Hang on like your mess. Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. Today, since we're doing chicken processing, I wanted to do a video not just about chicken processing, but the essential equipment needed to make an on-farm chicken processing business profitable. And we're going to show our examples and of course our opinion. There's varying opinions on this, but we're going to show what you really need to be able to turn a chicken processing setup on farm to actually make some money. So let's jump in and look at it. So really, if you go back and look, when you think of chicken processing, the way our grandparents or our great-grandparents used to do it, they didn't have a lot of this stuff. Granted, they weren't doing it at a scale to most likely produce revenue. It was on the homestead, it was to produce food. So they didn't need a bunch of equipment. It was, hand pluck a chicken, drop it in a pot, that type of thing. But when you take just a homestead chicken processing for where you feed yourself and your family, to an opportunity to generate revenue, then you have to incorporate equipment to offset the time associated with that. So our first batch of chickens this year, we finished about 100. I've had some attrition when they're on pasture, so I think I'm probably in the low 90s right now as far as Cornish cross birds we're going to process. Birds are 8 weeks old, actually 8 weeks and 2 days old, and ready to go in our processing. Now, the key equipment that we require, or that we need to be able to make this process move smoothly, there's really two key points. One is a scalder, so we can obviously get a good scald on them and be ready to remove those feathers quickly. And the second is a plucker. They kind of walk hand in hand. A good scald allows you to have a good pluck. So that is probably the most time-consuming aspect of chicken processing in our experience. Now, all the rest of the equipment really can be substituted with quite a few things. It's really kind of gravy. So you think about your killing process. This unit has 6 killing cones, all stainless steel, very nice, very sexy. But that isn't required. You could have one killing cone, you can take a traffic cone and cut it up. That's what we used to use to be able to start the process. Your finishing tables, your evisceration tables, again, stainless steel on this rig. Not necessarily what you need. You could just use any plastic folding table, anything like that. Your chill tank, same. You could just use coolers. So as we go through this process in the next 2 days, I want to detail each piece of equipment and talk about it expense-wise. And again, in our experience, lay out what we think would be the most relevant piece of equipment to buy in what order and how you can substitute. And again, the goal is for a chicken processing business on your farm that generates revenue positive results, not just food for yourself. This is actually food for yourself and profit to help fund the expansion of your farm and other endeavors. So obviously I need to address the 2,000-pound gorilla sitting in our driveway. And this is one of those things where this may be a unicorn in your state, or this may be something that's readily available. This is a rented unit. And it's rented from our local West Virginia Farmers Market Association. So it's a state organization. They have 2 of these trailers available. And you can lease them in order to do your chicken processing. And the leasing is very, very inexpensive. I believe my total out of pocket, if I clean it up and get my damage deposit back, is less than $50. So that makes processing a small number of chickens, like we're only doing 100 today or in the next 2 days. That makes that very, very profitable when you look at acquiring all this equipment that's going to allow me to do it very quickly for that low price of less than $50 net. If you're going to start a chicken processing business, this is the first thing I would look into to see if your extension office, your ag department, any association like that near you has one of these units available for renting, because this is going to allow you to jump light years ahead in turning a profit versus starting to build up some of this equipment. So that's my first piece of advice. Find a rental unit like this if you can. If it's not, then don't give up hope, because there's things that you can do, things that you can add on as we go along. And that's what we'll talk about in this video as we go through our process. So if you have experience raising chickens on pasture, or however you do it, then you probably already have the infrastructure in place, like the chicken tractors like we do. So that really, that you factor that in. However, I know a lot of people don't necessarily raise their meat birds on pasture, or at least in tractors. There's different variations you can do there. So that really doesn't factor into this. If you were starting a meat bird business, I would definitely recommend a couple years under your belt of just raising your own, just so you can get a feel for it. So we're going to load up some to the trailer and take them up to be in our staging area for process. That allows their crops to be emptied. Cornish crossman, they've got metabolism like crazy, so they're constantly pooping. So we get them in our trailer here that's just got a metal floor. They don't have access to grass or feed. Then that allows their crops to clear. We'll give them some water too, so they can help flush out as well. So I think the first piece of equipment that you got to look at if you're going to try to put together a profitable pastured poultry operation is, of course, the plucker. That's your biggest bottleneck in production. Now, we've processed chickens without a plucker. I think we actually did a video about it years ago where we skinned out the chickens. And that, again, worked fine for personal consumption. Took a pretty long time. And, of course, reduced the quality of the chicken a little bit with not having skin on. Plucker, however, is going to be the greatest investment, I think, starting out. And, you don't have to hit the ground running with these pluckers that are $3,000–$4,000. You can, I think there's plans, you can actually build your own. Whiz-Bang has a lot of plans on the internet where you can just take a 55-gallon drum by the fingers, although the fingers are crazy expensive too by the time you add them all up. But anyway, it's a decent investment, but it's worth it to start there. And maybe you build your own for $400, depending on what you can salvage and what you've got to go purchase, and then start there. And then as it grows, you can get up to a professional one. Again, those whiz-bangs work great, but I think when you try to do a couple hundred birds at one time, it's going to show some limitations. The next purchase after that would be a scalder. Now you can wait a little bit on a scalder, and it's one of those things typical with any manufacturing or any process. Once you trade labor for technology, so you could actually get away with just doing your own scalding in a pot over fire, but you want that temperature regulation. You want to be that 150, 155 degrees to get a good scald without cooking the bird or under scalding. So yeah, if you had somebody to stand there and just man that scalder, adjust the heat, and it's just a pot over fire, sure, you could do that. With something like this, then you've got temperature regulated, you've got the rotisserie that spins them around so they get good coverage. It's on a timer, thermostat controlled, all that kind of stuff. But again, you're looking, I think this unit here, this is a poultry, man. If I believe it's $3,000 or $4,000 for this turkey right here. So this is pretty substantial. But this would be what I would consider number 2 piece of processing equipment to have if you're going to try to get your operation to a commercial level. But if you look at that, between the plucker and the scalder, you could be looking at $5,000 to $7,000 to get the professional level. So you really got to have some serious production up to justify that, or each year you're bankrolling some of your profit to get to where you can pay cash for these. So really everything after that is just kind of personal preference and what you can use to, or what you can acquire to set up for your use. So we've got our evisceration table, this little stainless steel table. Frankly, the size of birds we do and the help that we have, a 2-person evisceration table just isn't enough. So we'll set up our, where'd it go? Our picnic table here, we'll bring it over. So if we've got a 3rd eviscerator or a 4th eviscerator, then they can use that picnic table. But it's kind of low, so it needs to be lifted up. But those type of things, all you need is a workstation. This one's got a nice little port here to drop your eviscerate down into your bucket. It's got the little stainless steel guardrail here so your chicken doesn't go sliding off. And the thing that's kind of funny with this trailer, the way it's built, everything drains off the table toward the operator. So I actually need to jack up that side of the trailers to get things to drain this way, but just little details like that. Chill tanks, of course, could be anything. Could be just a big cooler. The stainless steel chill tank right beside the eviscerate table is nice. We fill it full of water, fill it full of ice, and put vinegar in it too, so that helps keep the sterilization process going. Killing cones, this is a 6 station. We usually don't use all 6. I use 4 at a time just to keep just the rotation going, but something like this is really nice. Stainless steel catch trough with a drain. Yeah, this would be a substantial investment if you wanted to do that. But you see there's some that have the kind of the rotary, the carousel type killing cones that you can buy. Again, those are those investments that you look at and say, okay, is this my bottleneck in production? Is this where we're slowing it down? If I've got 1 killing cone or 2 killing cones just mounted on a nearby tree or some sort of stand that you've made, then you can audit that and make those investments as necessary. So the details come in when you've got kind of your finishing. So what are you going to use to store your birds in? So we've got these big igloo coolers that we put them in after they come out of the chill tank and they're ready for final inspection. And they go in these coolers with ice. So we've got 2 of those. So those are a decent little investment. And again, part of our processing, got our LEM shrink wrap, vacuum sealer, not shrink wrap, vacuum sealer. So we can, when we part out some of the chickens, we can vacuum seal it. Of course, you got to have a scale and the supplies. You get your shrink bags, you get your vacuum seal material, you get your labels, you get your zip ties, all those type of things. Knives, aprons, all those type of things come into play. You want to have those. And then, of course, for the shrink itself, we use we got this at Cabela's. This is one of those turkey fryers. So it's a big pot with a burner that goes to a propane tank. And that allows us to get that water up to that 190 degrees that you need to get that shrink on, get a really nice seal on the birds as you wrap them up whole. And of course, the one big piece you need to take into consideration if you're going to do birds in mass and bulk and not have people show up on farm to pick them up that day, of course, is freezer storage. So what we processed yesterday, we've already got packaged in there, all nice and shrunk down in their shrink bags. But that could be a considerable investment as well. This one freezer here actually was a pretty good deal. It was a scratch and dent. I think I got it for $300 before the great freezer madness happened. And that allowed us to add another. So we have 5 here in the garage. And that gives us the opportunity to store a lot of this stuff we do in bulk. Primarily it stores pork, but we can also store our chicken as well. So I guess another piece of advice that I would offer is to really weigh the true costs of everything if you're going to ramp up to make a commercial operation out of your poultry processing. For example, for our coolers, the amount of ice, I'm probably going to go through, just for our 100 birds, going to go through 40 bags of ice. And so I'm sitting at about, what, $60. So actually, no, a little bit more than that, probably about $80 by the time we're done, because I think they're just under $2 a bag. So how does that come into play? Well, of course, if you look at the cost of that, $80 in ice, and I've got, let's say for the sake of easy math, 100 birds, well, I've just added 80 cents to the cost of my bird, of each bird. So make sure we're factoring those type of things in. Ice is ice, but that comes into play as well with your cost. Now, I could invest in an ice maker and offset some of that cost, because then all I'd require would be the power and the water. But you got to get to where that makes sense all year long to have a piece of equipment that needs maintenance, that's always going to draw power, those type of things. And some of those ice makers, if you get the really huge ones where they have storage, great. But if you get the smaller ice makers, then you have to be taking ice out and storing it in a big freezer somewhere anyway. So that could compound the issue. Right now, for us, buying ice just makes the most sense. So needless to say, starting with sharp knives is very important. And I'm no knife expert, and I've gone through multiple sharpeners and finally landed on one of these diamond tip sharpening stones. This is a Kota, and it works pretty well, and it allows me to get a pretty good edge. Key is obviously keep dressing them. I've got a dressing stone here as well. Can't do it as fast as the guys you see on TV with like, so do what we can. The knives that we use, I'll post a link. I think I shared those. Just throughout the process of doing it over the years, kind of landed on these knives. I have one of my favorites. I can't even remember where I got this thing, but look at that guy. All discolored and everything. It's a true steel knife. And man, I can put an edge on that. That's great. I like to use that since it's a little heavier. I like to use that for taking off legs and anything heavier like that. All right, so 2 days worth of processing, got everything done. Got the trailer cleaned up, still cleaning up the last little bit of feathers and things here, some buckets and coolers to clean up. Had to go inside for a bit and wait for the sun to get off of the driveway because it was getting so hot. I feel like a rented mule, been ridden hard and put away wet. So what we did a little differently this year is we cut up about half our chicks. Ended up having 91 birds. So we had 100, we had some attrition throughout the life cycle. So we ended up cutting up 91 birds. And we actually parted half of those out. Let me show you here. So you can see there's some whole birds. And then there's cuts over here. And then we have another whole freezer. I won't show you because it's covered in crud right now. Actually, it's that freezer over there. Just all blocked in with a bunch of stuff. That one, little guy. So that was completely full of cuts that we cut up. So that's shrinked. Oh my goodness. That is vacuum sealed breasts, vacuum sealed tenders, vacuum sealed thighs and legs, and vacuum sealed wings. And we used our new LEM vacuum sealer. We ran out of bags, so we've got to go get some this evening. We're going to run out to Cabela's because we know those are compatible, and we'll be able to finish up that sealing. But so that's one thing I want to do. We'll do another video here in a couple weeks to do a full cost analysis. I've got most of those birds sold already, and we're debating whether or not we're going to sell our cuts. That's something we're completely able to do with our exemption here in the state. So we may make those available for my customers. But once we do that, we want to do a cost analysis and just see how this works out. Because now, as we talked about with the equipment, with the individual process cuts, we've got the expense of the equipment, and then there's all these peripherals. So, you know, the bags themselves, the paper towels, went through a ton of paper towels. You look over here, went through one complete 20-pound canister of propane to run the scalder, and then to run the shrinker, the actual shrink bag that we use for whole chickens. Didn't use much because we only did half of those, but still use some propane there. All the ice we talked about already. So there's a lot of additional expenses there that I'm not used to having. So I'm really anxious to see how that lays out. And of course, I want to make sure to be able to do my cost analysis, as I've talked about on our podcast. Do a full cost analysis there to make sure I'm factoring everything in before we go to sell these individual cuts. We know how to price them. Obviously, don't want to price them and lose money after doing 2 days of a lot of hard work. But look for that video. We'll detail that as we get all of our details together. And I'm going to finish cleaning up and go slop the hogs. All right, take care, everybody.